What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamer Dad channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to be talking about the Division 2 and we're going to talk about PvP. And I always used to have this argument with a lot of folk back in the early days of the Division 2. I used to, basically conclude in my videos and comments regarding PvP that the Division 2 was a much more emphatic PvE game in the sense that the developers seem to have been much more centered around making PvE the majority part of the game without really any need, for PvP. So they focus on PvE as the main part and PvP was a small part. This usually got me in trouble. A lot of the community still had at the back of their minds the Division 1 perception. And for the most part, I can't blame anybody because if you kind of think about it, Red Storm was working on the Division 2 PvP as well, but they tried to implement some things that would pull people into PvP and all of that, but it just didn't necessarily work out. And I've always said this, that if you think about the division, the division's approach to PvP, it really is very strange for a lot of gamers. And so for most people, they just didn't choose, or at least they refused to touch the PvP and avoided it altogether. Also, seeing some other things that happen in the dark zone, like cheating, people using all kinds of different things, that also was kind of a deterrent as well, with Ubisoft not implementing good policies, or at least consistent policies that were effective enough to clean up the dark zone from the Division 1 and even in the Division 2. So there were many things that you can kind of cite towards it. Now, I guess we need to look at potentially why this was the approach that it decided to use. I've always thought that the power needed to balance a division like PvP is probably just too much. The game has so many parameters all over the place. If you even notice with the PvP for the Division 2, the developers take their time to always bring out these gear sets and brand sets that are basically neutered right out the table. Like, they're not really, strong or impactful for the most part. Let me give you guys a very clear, example and reality of this is Division 2 right now has so many brand sets and so many gear sets, but at the end of the day, we're only going to be using like 3 or 4 of everything. Why is this the case? Why are we only using so minimal of the resources in the game? I think it's simply because, PvP can scale like a crazy idiot in terms of the way people take things in there and break everything. And it causes this weird, now everything is broken in the dark zone and so on and so forth. For the longest time, it was skills, skills that were designed for PvE enemies with high health. They somehow did not necessarily get their balance for PvP. Probably, maybe it didn't get done on time. Maybe there was just nobody that was able to take on the task because there's a limited team that's supporting the Division 2 and so on and so forth. So these constraints, to me, already kind of spoke a while back. Now, seeing even how a lot of the developers had been moved to other projects, they moved them, some of them to Star Wars, some of them to Avatar. It just, in my opinion, did not seem likely that they were going to put an emphasis on PvP. And Ubisoft seems to have been shifting a lot away from a lot of what happened to the Division 1 in the Division 1 anyways, with a lot of the madness that went on in the dark zone, people, stalking one another, doxing people. You guys have no idea how nasty the Division 1 was. We had a lot of, I don't know who these folk were, but they were very rancid against one another. I mean, they took it all the way outside of the dark zone into even trying to find other people's locations and, issue threats, and it was out of hand. And so, again, I mean, I don't know how to correlate this, but it was a thing that happened. And we also even got to see the Division 2 make some modifications in the dark zone with VoIP and, all of this stuff. Then you also had the influence of, content creators who were not necessarily too big on PvP, or at least who had, issues with certain things in PvP and wanted it to be changed for their own sake. I remember, a YouTuber one time, we had this move in the Division 2. This, I think it was a gear set, it was a holster or something like that. If you ran from cover to cover, it actually healed you. So like this action that I just took just now, as you were making your way from cover to cover, it was giving you some benefits. And these people said, oh, this is such a big deal in the dark zone, blah, 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 blah. This was something we were using in PvP, but they didn't like the way it was being used in PvE. Sorry, we're using it in PvE all the time. They didn't like the way it was being used in the dark zone and in, other, modes. And so they wanted it nerfed, and it got nerfed by the developers for everybody. So the tit for tat, the nerf for buff, mindset is very weird. And I think with ease, it's probably easier for you to go in and just make adjustments to enemy NPC types versus player gear and player buffs and all that stuff, because it's a very in my opinion, it's a very defined entity. An enemy NPC will have specific amount of health. The developers can go in, take an enemy NPC, give it a health value, take the gear, give it a specific value, and apply damage and see how things work. But when it comes to PvP, everything is kind of arbitrary at this point, because players will do things, in a diverse way. There may be somebody on the team that's giving everybody these buffs and somebody on the team that's taking away buffs from the other person. And it's a very interesting gameplay sequence. It's just something that is more than any development team can realistically choose for the return on investment. And here we go again. It's the thing about money. Money, or lack thereof, or at least not being able to see it or realize how they may see it, basically killed the PvP prospects of the Division 2. The developers, or whoever the money crunchers were, probably did not see a path forward to be able to support PvP from a monetary perspective compared to PvE, and they've probably decided that they're probably not going to pursue it in a consistent manner. That's why the Division 2, in my opinion, is a PvE-centered game. There could be other reasons, but I mean, this is the reason these gaming companies exist. So where can we find games that are unapologetically PvP centered? We've seen some games come out like Tarkov. We've seen some other games basically, put in place all kinds of really cool stuff to ensure that the gamers, are able to, enjoy these experiences. And I'm sure Ubisoft can actually put developers to doing something like that. In fact, they were working on Heartland, which seemed, according to the conversations, that they, it had a PvP focus. But we don't know where Heartland is right now. We don't know exactly what's going on. And maybe they may potentially backtrack and implement these things with the Division 3 at launch. But nobody really knows. If you kind of think about things from the grand scheme of things, nobody's really aware as to how we're going to go with all of this stuff. But I wanted to go ahead and comment on this and put a note here, because I've been saying this for a long time. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about all of this. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you soon in another one. Peace out.